your seat and hang on.
If any man show just cause, where they may not lawfully be joined together.
Because Bond is on the move. And if you miss this one, you'll miss the most exciting 007 adventure of them all.
And now for all you music lovers, it's time for your traffic report. There's a What is it, Scooby? Can't you see I'm broadcasting here? Pile up on the tri-level, got you backed up all the way to the off-ramp. So, if you're traveling this morning, try to give yourself an extra day or two, folks. Hang on, folks. I've just been handed this important bulletin. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our regularly scheduled program to bring you this special report, like live as it happens.
Hi, this is Nick Mason from Pink Floyd, and you're listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Okay, listeners, welcome. You're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio and Cars. I'm your show host, Robert. Running your computers and Google TanTalk1340.com, and you can see us live here in the studio. Don't forget to check out our website, GulfstreamMotorsports.com, where you can find out all about us. And if you missed any of our past shows, don't forget to check out our archive page, NostalgicRadioandCars.com. Good evening, Bobby. How are you?
I'm doing good. Just keeping the seat warm here.
Keeping the seat warm. How about you, Tommy? You keeping your seat warm?
Oh, my seat's warm.
Is it? Okay, you're behind the COVID-20.
Sitting here all damn day.
Too warm.
Yeah. One of these days we got to fix this mic thing. This is really starting to. Anyway, we got a real exciting show for you this evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rocktober, and as we promised, we're going to deliver. And we're going to have, and we probably will have some pretty interesting musical people, musical guests, musical related, and maybe even a guitarist or two. But tonight we have a very special guest on our show. I'm delighted to have him here with us. Actually, he'll be on the phone here in a little bit. And Rocktober, yes, music, man. And it's Nostalgic Radio and Cars, even though it's predominantly cars. But we've gotten into music because we've always done music. Actually, when the very first show, I played a lot of music. And then Lee.
Where it's stuck.
Yeah. And Lee says, well, Robert, instead of playing music, why don't you talk about cars since you know a lot about cars? So then we transitioned to cars. And then we started going to some of these concerts. And then we transitioned back to the concerts. And so one thing's back and forth here a little bit. Plus, I play a little musical, a few musical instruments. I'm a little bit of guitar, pound on the drums once in a while, and then I play the ivories, tickle the ivories, as they say, plus keyboards. At any rate, so without further ado, I think what we're going to do is we're going to not much going on in the way of car shows and stuff like that.
But if there is, it would be on FLAcarshows.com.
It would be on FLAcarshows.com, yes, where you can find out all about this stuff. But meantime, I still see a lot of people.
Cruising around?
Cruising around, yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. So get out there, drive your cars, drive your motorcycles.
It's going to be a cool front this weekend, so...
drop-top weather.
Change
yeah.
your oil.
Yeah. Okay, on that note, I think Tom's going to fire up we're going to do a quick commercial. Then we're going to fire up the stereo. Then we're going to bring out a very special guest for the evening. In the meantime, everybody stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. That little thing here on the radio knob there? Okay.
It's dirty, so don't touch it.
Yeah. And, hey, you got a computer. Just you can see us live here on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that other good stuff. Anyway, hey, you're tuning in to Nostalgic Radio Cars. Don't touch it down. We'll be right back.
You may be owed some money. After 911 and 411, call 541. That's 727-541-1741. Call Gulfstream Motorsports for a diminished value report. Due to my 28 years experience in the auto salvage business, I'm very good with wrecks. So if your car's been involved in a wreck, call me for a diminished value report. Call 727-541-1741. You may be owed some money for the lost value of your repaired vehicle. And visit us at GulfstreamMotorsports.com.
All his life, he's been a loner, an outsider, a fighter.
You Johnny Walker?
A bruised heart and a battered body.
You look like a cowboy. You a cowboy?
He's got two lessons to learn in life.
I love the way you fight, John. I never saw anybody fight like that. Hey, man, you get my money?
How to take care of himself.
You go back to where you came from. Hey, fat man, nobody tells me where to go back there.
And how to care for somebody else.
That Ruby, she's a good one. She's so pretty. I got an idea. I got something for us.
You gotta take care of yourself, Johnny.
You see that guy there? He deals diamonds. I want to help you.
In my professional opinion, the next time somebody hits this guy in the head, he could drop dead.
All I need is one big score. Let me tell you what you can't do, Johnny Walker. You can't fight. No more.
Hey everybody, this is Andy Powell, guitarist, Wishbone Ash, and you are listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Okay, we're back and you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. And since this show is really about musical instruments and legends in the industry, for those of you guys out there, like myself, that play guitar, whether you play a 6-string or a 4-string, you know how important it is to have your guitar set up. And the gentleman that I have coming on, and I'm about to introduce in a few minutes, or a few seconds, I should say, had a very significant role and was the guitar tech for one of the most, let's just say, best guitars on the planet. I'm delighted to welcome to the show this evening, Lee Dickinson. Lee, how are you?
Oh, man, get it right. I've been waiting since 7 o'clock.
I'm sorry. Anyway.
You're thinking of the singer with Iron Maiden. That's the Dickinson. I'm the Dickinson.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Iron Maiden. Wow, there we go. Okay. Anyway, so Lee, how you been? Welcome to the show. It's a real, true honor and a pleasure to have you on the show this evening. And
well, thank you very much.
And you were the guitar tech for Eric Clapton for 30 years. So what
30 years.
Yeah.
It seemed like 50.
Seems like 50. So what I want to know is, how do you become guitar tech? So what did you do at the very beginning, and how did you end up working with the legendary Eric Clapton himself?
Well, I migrated to London from my native Scotland, crikey, mid-70s, I think. A lot of my friends had gone down there, and I wanted to get into touring or doing something of that nature, you know. And I worked for a company that hired equipment and did stuff, and I went to work for them. And amongst the clients were Eric, but I did tours with Weather Report, and I did a couple of Ramones tours, Manhattan Transfer, a real diverse selection of artists. And I was on a couple of Eric tours, and as part of the staff, and we got on well. And cut a long story short, he was in Japan in '79, and I was there, and we needed someone to take care of the guitars, and I got given the gig, and I held on to that rough ride for 30 years.
Wow. So were you a musician at a young age? I mean, how do you, to become a guitar tech, do you have to be an actual musician, or do you have to have a real good understanding of the musical instrument yourself? And tell us how that works, how that all kind of evolves.
Well, I know lots of guitar techs that literally can't play a chord, but they're technically very good with, electronics and stuff like that. And I know other guitar techs that some are better than the guitar players they're working for. You know, it's a real diverse selection of people. I'd classify myself as mediocre. And I play guitar just because I write songs, and I have mountains of stuff that I'm looking for someone to write with, and I've been doing for a long time. But that was the impetus to get me going, was to interpret my songs. And of course, if you're working for an artist, it does help if you can play a couple of their riffs or whatever, sound check, line check, because a lot of them don't come and do that.
So now, when a musician, let's just say, like in Eric Clapton's case, okay, mm-hmm. and so when he tours, you're with him all the time, and your job is to set the guitar up, correct? It's not necessarily that you go on stage and gig the guitar or any of the equipment, but it's to basically set the guitar up so that the musician can play his or her style, correct?
Every guitar player is different. Every guitar player requires different things from their tech. You know, some people are highly involved in the set, you know, like the Edge from U2, his tech is like, you know, almost a part of the show, you know, changing effects and doing all kinds of stuff. My job with Eric, essentially as a guitar tech, you're there, you set up the equipment, you make sure the guitar's right for him, you make sure the action's right for him, you make sure everything's cool, that you've got spares, and you work all day towards the show. You make sure the guitar's not going to go out of tune, which is a technique in itself. Then as he walks on stage, you present him with the guitar, and he takes it from there. Eric was the kind of guy that didn't like to change too often, so only if he bust a string would he change from the main guitar to the spare. And, then if we were doing a blues tour, which we did a very, very unique tour that he did just doing blues, well, I had like maybe 22 guitars, you know, different tunings all the time, guitars for slide, guitars to emulate this artist, Birdland if he was doing Elmore James, 335 if he was doing any of the King stuff, that kind of thing. And, just be there all the time. And then, all the recording projects where I do everything from take care of the rest of the artists in the studio if they don't have crew, to parking the cars, feeding the meters, organizing lunch, organizing visits to people, liaising, a mountain of things really. And there's a lot of personal assistant stuff in my tenure with Eric. You know, if we'd go to New York, if he's going to play at the Beacon Theatre with the Allman Brothers, it would just be he and I. It wouldn't be all the entourage, tour manager, assistant tour manager, stage managers, yada yada. It would just be he and I. So we did a lot of stuff like that. But on tour, as I just explained, that was my gig. Make sure everything's working, do the line check, be right there for the band, take him a guitar to the dressing room so he can rehearse or practice beforehand, double check everything, help the support act if we can. And then when the moment comes, the lights go down, be standing there, hand him the guitar, and off he goes.
So would it be fair to say that you're almost like the right-hand man for the actual entertainer himself? In this case, Eric?
Well, in a live situation, everyone counts in a live situation, but the three main people really were someone like Eric, is the sound guy, obviously. That's got to be right. The lighting guy can't mess up. And me, I'm what he's got on stage for everything. If he has a problem, we have to fix it real quick. If something happens to the amp, we have to be able to switch really quickly. If something goes wrong with the radio, you have a hard wire just there to plug them back into a cord. Just, you have to think of all these things, and it's all just about that moment he walks on stage, and you're kind of free in a way to concentrate just purely on the show. And all I ever did was have a giant monitor, which my ears are suffering from now, just with Eric in it, because I don't want to hear the rest of the band, and we didn't use in-ears. Eric didn't like them, so we just used old style stuff. And yeah, right hand man, sure, live shows, because if you're in Madison Square Garden, there's 20,000 people staring at him, and listening to him. They notice other things going on, but if a speaker goes out or a light goes out, no one really notices. If something happens to the artist, if he can't be heard, or if his guitar has an intermittent problem with the radio or something, then you've got to be right on it. And I did that from 1979. I took over in Japan and Tokyo in 1979, and then he kicked me out at the end of 2009.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Okay, so in Eric's particular case, were his guitars tricked out or anything like that, or were his guitars pretty much Fender Custom Shop production style, standard pickups, standard, what type of weight strings did he use, pots, anything unusual, anything like that, anything special about his tuner, his bridge, the nut, anything like that? Or was it just, like I said, more
Eric was very, very happy. We had a tremendous bunch of guys, amongst them Larry Brooks, Todd Krause, Jay Black, John Page, Mark Kendrick, so many people. And they each guy, after a couple of years, was given the job of doing the Clapton Strats. So Eric was very happy with them, and apart from just maybe a couple of tweaks to the action, he was very happy to open the case. Oh, I would open the case, obviously. Just look at it, say, yep, we're good to go. And if he wanted something changed, he'd tell me. That didn't apply, to vintage guitars and stuff. I mean, sometimes, if we bought an old L5 or we bought, an old Les Paul, I may have to do just a couple of tweaks on it, but Eric didn't really have an interest in what kind of pots were in there, what the nut material was, or was the brink, was the bridge zinc or alloy or whatever. It's just make sure it's right for me to play, and you let them go. It's like a pedigree racehorse, really. There's all this fussing and training and exercising and nurturing, but once they go out on the track and once the guy says go, they take over. That's what guitar players of Eric's ilk do. You just turn them loose, let them go, just make sure everything's right.
Now, early on, I was looking at some videos, and because I kind of, I have an interest in guitars, obviously, and I like vintage guitars a lot. So back in the day, Eric, I think, played Gibsons, and I remember in particular there was one that was an SG, and I guess it was nicknamed. It was painted kind of a really cool psychedelic color, and it was called the Fool. And then I think he played maybe once in a while. You see him with a Les Paul, but his axe of choice, as they say in the business, is always been a Strat, right?
Not always, no, because as you just said, in the early days, you'll never see him playing a Strat. In the very early days, pre John Mayall and stuff, he was playing a red Telecaster. Then he went on, the Les Paul was around the Mayall period and the Cream stuff. Then the Fool were actually two people, I think, from Amsterdam or somewhere in Europe, who did that kind of stuff, and they were responsible for painting the Beatles. Beatles had a store in London, and it was all incredibly psychedelic on the outside. I mean, it was amazing, and they were collectively the Fool. The SG, as you saw, if you look at the old Cream stuff, Jack was playing, I think, a six-string bass, Fender six-string bass, that was painted by the Fool, and Eric had the SG. But through the Cream period, you'll see him play Firebird, you'll see him play Les Paul's SG, 335, that he famously used at their farewell show, and I think it was 69 at the Royal Albert Hall. He's just wailing away on the 335. It was only later he got into Strats, and then that's what, most of the live footage you'll see of him over the 30 years, he very rarely, on a normal Eric Clapton tour set, you would very rarely see him play Les Paul, maybe to emphasize a tone on one song. But it was mostly Strats, all the time.
We were talking once, and you were talking about style. Okay, so Eric has a style, and it's like I played the clip from the movie Homeboy, and I think you were telling me that Eric and you went to the set, and I guess you guys were. That's how it was involved in doing some songs, some backing music for that particular movie, and it's interesting because, like you said, when you listen, if you know music, guitarists have a style, and there's without a doubt, Jimi Hendrix had his style, Clapton has his style, Pete Townsend has his style. I mean, you can pick these guitarists out, and the late Eddie Van Halen, they all have a style. And you were telling me that people actually go out and spend thousands of dollars trying to have a guitar made like these particular musicians, hoping to emulate them, but it's all about their style. So why don't you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I don't know too much about your show's Nostalgic Radio. I like Nostalgic Radio, but I don't know too much about cars. But I think you made the point when we talked the other day, like you can be, again, I don't know too much about the thing here, but a NASCAR or a Formula One driver. Mm-hmm. And if you're a multi-millionaire, you can go out and buy that same car and get yourself access to the same track. But it's entirely down to the driver being in this sense of what we're talking about, the guitar player. And the thing that brought it home to me, this is a great example. Many, many, many years ago, Eric used to finish his British tours in a small town called Guildford because it was very, very close to his, country home. And it meant that all his old aunts, uncles, friends of the pub, the local vicar, everyone could come and see that show without having to travel halfway across Europe or something. And one night we were doing a show, and Eric, a very, very small stage. So normally I would have, at the time, Music Man was his choice of equipment. So I'd have two Music Man HD 130 heads and two open back cabinets with JBL K120 speakers. And the second would only be if his amp blew a fuse. I had an AB switch him onto the second setup. In this particular setting, I had to stack the cabinets and stack the amps on top because of restrictions on the stage size. It was only a small venue. And we had tons of guest artists that would come along each year. Elton would come along, George Harrison would pop in because they all lived down near the area of Guildford. But on this particular night, Jeff came in, Jeff Beck, who is my favorite. And Eric said to me, they came off stage at the Encore, and he said, I'm going to bring Jeff on now, give him a guitar and sort it out, And I said, yeah, okay. So I said to Jeff, I've got a 1960 Les Paul, or I've got Brownie, the whatever it was, 56 Sunburst Strat. He said, I'll take the Strat. So he sat with it, just with his ear to the body, just practicing for a couple of minutes. Eric introduces him. I said, Jeff, the only thing I can plug you into is Eric's spare amp, and you'll come through his spare cabinet. But that's all I got. And he said, that's fine. So Jeff comes on. Eric's playing Blackie, which is like a hybrid 56, 57 Strat. Jeff's playing Brownie. For all intents and purposes, you can't really tell much difference between the two guitars. He's playing through the same speakers, the same amp, without adjusting the settings. And it was like black and white, A to Z, night and day. Unbelievable. And that's when it struck me, that's the first time. And it was early in my career with Eric, and that's when I knew that it's this correlation that these guys have. It's a special thing. You can be technically an incredible guitar player, read charts inside out, compose. But if you don't have that thing, the soul, the emotion, then you're not going to really interpret it right. So anyway, so they both play and they're exchanging solos. I'm standing behind the stack and I'm listening to Eric playing through the bottom cabinet and Jeff playing through the top. And it was absolutely breathtaking. The difference in tone, the difference in sound, the difference in technique. And that's what I mean. The great guys have it. Eric's just one of those guys. He's a natural. He closes his eyes and he goes off and he plays. And so many people try and emulate him and every other great guitar player. And as I said, they go and buy all the equipment. They get to the custom shop and I must have the same guitar as Clapton. It must be built by the same guy. I've got to have the same amp with the same tubes, the same settings, the same everything. they get people, what are Eric's settings? Can you tell me? Yeah, sure. Well, I don't sound like Eric. I'm not getting that sound. And that's the thing. There's the buzz, right? The rub rather right there. They're never going to sound like Eric because Eric is Eric. Jimmy Page is Jimmy Page. Jeff Beck's Jeff Beck. Steve Vai is Steve Vai, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Martin Knopfler is Martin Knopfler.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny. We almost left him out too. Let me ask you this. Okay, so what is your take on this is the all-time debate. It's like this in the automotive world. Who's the greatest race car driver? Was it Sterling Moss? Was it Fangio? Was it Dan Gurney? Was it Carroll Shelby? Was it Salvadori? And what's the same thing? Those guys had a style. They all had amazing successes. Well, it's like saying, is Jimi Hendrix rated the greatest guitarist? Is Eddie Van Halen? Is Eric Clapton? Is Jimmy Page? Is Jeff Beck? Mark Knopfler, all these guys you're talking about, just great guitarists. To me, I think they're all great and they have their own style. And so to rank them seems kind of funny. I mean, it seems kind of absurd in a way, because like you said, it's about their style.
It's all about the way they play. I've told it to. I've done lots of where I talk at guitar shows and I'm hired for private events and that's the thing I always try and emphasize. People go, how can I sound like Eric? How can I sound? I said, well, you can't, because you can copy it and you can copy a lot of the technique and the vibrato and the runs and the licks and the scale that he's playing in, like a blues pentatonic scale. But it's this correlation between the brain, the heart, and the hand. Imagine a triangle. And once that triangle is drawn, that's it. Everyone's triangle is different, if you like. So Eric going out, that's why we did a thing called the ARMS tour years ago. It's called ARMS meant Action Research into Multiple Sclerosis. Ronnie Lane, bass player from the Faces, famous English musician, was suffering from it. All the guys decided we would do a couple of shows, which turned into a lot. And it was a multitude of great talent, with Charlie Watts playing drums. And the three guitar players were Page, Beck, and Clapton. First time they played together pretty much since they were in the Yardbirds. And when they're on stage together, doing their thing, you listen to Jimmy's solo, you listen to Eric's solo, you listen to Jeff's solo. Three entirely different planets in the solar system, that far apart. Totally, totally different. And that's what it is. It's a correlation between, you can be, it's not being the most, being able to read charts and write music and stuff. It's just this feeling. It's a feel thing. Most of it. You have to obviously practice and learn, but once you have that thing, then you become your own man. And Eric had it in spades. So does Jeff. So does Jimmy Page. But listening to the three of them on stage again, night and day. Although they may be playing the same riff or playing the same part, night and day. It's that thing I just told you. It's nothing other than brain, heart, and hands, and everyone's are different.
You mentioned Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, and Eric, and of course they were all basically back in the Yardbirds back in the day. And so as we move on a little bit, some of the bands out of the late 60s, now one of my favorites has always been Deep Purple. I'm a big fan of Ritchie Blackmore. And have you ever had any interaction with Ritchie? And your thoughts? And he's an excellent guitarist too. He's got his own style.
My friend passed away last year, a guy called Ian Ferguson. I know this Scottish guy who was his tech for a long, long time. Ritchie, I like Deep Purple too. They're one of the kind of bands I listened to the 70s. Ritchie's thing was, I think he was very classical, He was very a classical player in terms of just what he did with that band, and then he turned it into that kind of tone, the Marshall and Strat tone. Ritchie's another one that's very, very different. If you listen to, say, Ritchie Blackmore with Deep Purple, and then you listen to Steve Morse with Deep Purple, again, night and day, light years apart. Different guys, different brains, different hearts, different hands.
And you can feel it in the music. The music's different.
Well, the music's different. It's a harder rock thing. Like to say if you were trying to compare Ritchie to Eric, it wouldn't be fair because Eric's essentially a self-confessed blues player, but just has gone through many other genres in his career. And Ritchie, what he's doing now is incredibly different. The acoustic thing with his wife, but he was the guy at the time. Ritchie was just the man, and as far as rock bands in Britain and stuff went. But then, for me, I've listened to Eric going through so many changes in 30 years. And my favorite period is always going to be Cream, because it was just so unique. So yeah, Richie's a great player. There's tons of great players, and that's the sad thing about every musician, not just guitar players, but drummers, keyboard players, all around the world. There's guys that are just there's off the charts fantastic who will never ever make it through a mixture of, I don't know, have family, bad luck, job, lack of ambition or whatever, never getting the break that they deserve. And it's not just confined to the guys that we know. There's some amazing players all over the place, but they'll never ever get there. So the only point of reference we have is all the famous guys, excuse me. And as I say, I've managed to meet all my musical heroes and work with them or alongside them. And it's just turned me on to it more and more. It's like the difference between, if you look at blues, look at the difference between Freddie King, Albert King, and B.B. Nothing. The only similarity is the last name. They were just so different, and yet they were just playing blues because they had their own thing.
Tell us a story about you, Eric, and B.B. King. That's kind of an interesting story as well.
I've done a lot of things with B.B. over the years, who was, I must say, the kindest and most gracious, humble guy. He was just wonderful. A few years, I keep saying a few years, I've been gone from Eric 10, but back then we did this album called Riding with the King. We went to LA to record, and B.B. doesn't have a guitar tech, so I assumed that role. And it was just Eric paying homage to one of his heroes and allowing him to, just pretty much do what you want to do, play what you want to do on the record. And B.B. was just such a sweetheart, to be around him that much and listen to the stories they tell you about, guys like Howlin' Wolf and Little Walter and Muddy Waters and all these cats, what they used to get up to, and some stuff I can't obviously say on the radio, but it was always really interesting to listen to him. And then one particular thing, one night the producer called me and he said, "Look, man, I have a real problem with B.B.'s guitar." And I said, "Well, what's wrong?" And what B.B. used to do is if he was using Gibson strings, he'd take the entire length of the string and he'd poke it through the hole and he'd just keep winding and winding and winding and winding. And what happens then is the string doesn't have any, continuity. It's not a nice coil finishing low on the string post. It was just like they were overlapping and stuff. So he'd hit some bend, which would cause the string to slip. Not a lot, but enough to ruin the track. So there was this kind of, the producer said to Eric, "You have to tell B.B. to leave his guitar," because he wanted to take it with him every night. His old assistant, who's a wonderful character too. Another story, another time. We can't tell B.B.'s. You don't tell B.B. King he's out of tune, who's going to take responsibility? So I went over to B.B. just because he was finished for the day, and I said, "B.B.," and he sometimes called me Lee, but a lot of the time he would call me young man, I said, "B.B., is there any way you could leave Lucille with me tonight?" And he said, "Now, why do you want to do that, young man?" And I said, "Well, just give it a clean up and make sure everything's okay for tomorrow. We've got this heavy day recording. Maybe put a new set of strings on if you wouldn't mind." And he said to Norman, his guy, said, "Give him Lucille." And I said, "I'll take really good care of her." And he looked at me and he said, "Lee, I think she'll be happier this evening being in the arms of a younger man." And, so I restrung it the way I'd normally do it, stretched the strings in, next day, faultless, played the next 5 or 6 days in the same set of strings, absolutely faultless, never went out of tune. And as I said, just being around the man, he's just such a presence, but not in a humble way, not in an egotistical way. And absolute hero of Eric's and mine, of course, and all the blues guys out there. And then we got to play with lots of other great guys. The first American tour I ever did, Muddy Waters was the opening act.
Wow.
And that was a trip. And then we got to do stuff with Otis Rush and Hubert Sumlin and all the legends, really, John Lee Hooker.
That's some amazing. That's an amazing roster. How about Buddy Guy? Now, he's a little bit more of a contemporary, but he's an excellent guitarist too. Does both blues, rock and roll.
Buddy's another massive hero of Eric's. Maybe Buddy's even bigger an influence in his style and playing than B.B. for sure. But Buddy, is an older man now, as we all are. But he was a kind of a wild card. And there was a thing we did at the Royal Albert Hall. I've done over 125 shows there over the years. with different, mostly Eric and guesting and things like that. But we had this amazing project we took on. I'll try and tell it to you quickly. It was called 24 Nights at the Royal Albert Hall. So the first 6 were as a 4-piece band. While we were doing the 4-piece, we were in the Royal College of Music behind the Royal Albert Hall rehearsing the 8-piece band during the day. Then we'd come in, and then while we were playing the shows with the 8-piece band, we'd be in the Royal College of Music all day with the blues band, it was an entirely different set of musicians, which included Buddy. And then at the end of the blues section, we went on to the full orchestra thing conducted by the great Michael Kamen. I'll mention him as the legend. And the first night at the Albert Hall, Eric said, well, let's bring on Buddy last because, we'll give him a bit of reverence. So you've got like Jimmy Vaughan and Jimmy Lee Vaughan and Robert Cray and,
oh, wow.
and Albert Collins and Eric and stuff. And the first night, at the time, and I hope he's okay with it now, but at the time, he used to like to drink Crown Royal, did Buddy, And those Chicago guys, those old blues guys, the stories they tell you, the showmanship, trying to usurp or better the guy that you're guesting with, everybody has to try and blow everyone off the stage. Well, everyone had sort of gone down to smaller amps, things like that, with it being the Royal Albert Hall. But Buddy insisted on a half-stack Marshall, and I think it was a Fender Bassman. And Eric would be 3/4 way through the set, and he'd go, "Ladies and gentlemen, Buddy Guy," and Buddy would come on. He had that gleam in his eye, that look, and everyone thought, "Oh, here we go." And he just pulled out all the stops. You just come on and completely take over the first night. Playing to the audience, getting off the stage, playing with a drumstick on the string, doing all kinds of stuff. And the audience, of course, love it. But for the next 3 nights, I was privy to this discussion at the production meeting with Eric and the rest of the guys. They said, maybe we should bring Buddy on first. Before he sat down the bottle of Crown Royal. And he was still incredible and amazing, absolutely breathtaking. Buddy's kind of fits in the Jimi Hendrix genre of blues. He's pretty, he's deep and he's heavy. Wonderful, wonderful man. Another very humble guy. But that glint he had in his eye, I saw the musicians look at each other that first night and they're going, "Uh-oh, he's drunk the Crown Royal." So.
Another guy that I always thought was a very good, it's kind of like you watch a guy on stage and you watch how they handle a Strat. Now, I personally have one too. I've got a hardtail. It's early 70s, and I play a little Fender Mustang, and I also have an SG. And I'm more just rhythm, okay? But and you're right. You can play the style, and if you plug in a wah-wah and all that kind of stuff, you can kind of get those sounds that they had back then. But it's the style. But a guy that I always thought was really, really just cool with a Strat was Tony Joe White, and he was kind of like a swamp music. I don't know if you ever ran across him or not, if you ever listened to his music, but he just had a style of his own too, and it was just kind of really cool because, like Eric, when he plays, it looks so effortless. I mean, it's just so natural, fluid. I mean, he's just, and to me, that's what's impressive.
I met him once.
Yeah.
Later in his career. No one in my circles really, would talk about Tony Joe White as a great guitar player, but he was. And Tony Joe White, the reason I was so knocked out to meet him and just to shake his hand was he wrote one of my favorite ever songs called "A Rainy Night in Georgia."
No kidding.
Which has been covered by people like Gladys Knight and people like that. But just with his voice, and this is just one of the most emotional songs you could listen to. It's incredible. But Tony, again, was known for, the cowboy hat, the swamp thing, Pope Salad Annie and all that kind of stuff. But he had many, many strings to his bow. He wasn't just that guy. And he was a tasty player.
Eric, when he plays, now I like light strings. I play with 9s, 10s sometimes, depends on, because the strings kind of vary a little bit. But what weight strings does Eric play with?
10 to 46, 10, 13, 17, 26, 36, 46.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then
maybe on the jazz guitars, like we're using an L5 on the section, I'd use a heavier set, maybe go to 11s or something just for the tone.
What type of a pick does he use?
A guitar pick.
What?
Sorry, one of the banes of my life was the Eric Clapton picks, which are legendary. and I would sometimes have them made 3 times a week, just depending on someone saying something or a funny saying or a joke. And I'd get onto Ernie Ball, who took great care of us throughout my 30 years with all the strings, never let us down. And I'd call him up on a Sunday night from the Albert Hall and go, "Hey man, sorry to bother you at home. Is there any way that you can get me 200 of these by like Monday?" And I could hear him go, Sterling Ball, the guy who owned the company, he'd go, "Okay, yeah, right." "Yeah, no problem." And I'd have these picked. So Eric generally used what we would call a hard pick, Ernie Ball hard. So a lot of the times if he was playing blues or he was on the softer things like Tears in Heaven and stuff, he would just maybe play with his fingers on a gut string. But for most applications, a standard heavy pick.
Okay. Who are some of the other guys, well-known musicians that you did some guitar tech for? I mean, and did tech, were these people that you actually did stuff for, or were these just kind of like they happened to be on stage with Eric and then you just kind of helped out because you happened to be there and it was kind of a courtesy?
There was lots of those, but Eric liked a lot of vacation time, and on occasion I'd get maybe Pete Townshend's office call me up because my friend Alan Brogan, who was Pete's tech and worked for a lot of other bands, would be off doing something else, and Pete's going to do these TV shows and he's on Jules Holland and he's doing this. Can you take care of it? And I'd say, sure, and I'd go and work for Pete for that week. I always loved The Who, and another thing I got to do was be John Entwistle's bass tech at Madison Square Garden for like 6 nights while we were doing this full-on production with the backdrop of the movie of Quadrophenia, one of The Who's famous albums that Pete wrote. I got a call to look after Paul Simon one day. A guy called me from New York. I thought it was a joke. He said, "Paul's going to record in this studio in London with Brian Eno. They need someone. Can you be there on Monday?" And I said, "Sure," go into the studio with Paul for a few days. There's been tons of those things. I mean, those spring instantly to mind because they were kind of musical heroes.
You mentioned early on that you like to write music. Tell us a little bit about your writing experiences, and has any of your songs been turned into actual well-known songs, and are they out there that well-known musicians are playing?
Not yet, but I'm the eternal optimist. I've never really found the right person to write with. I need a person to write with who's good with the modern idiom of recording on the computer and who's, musically talented but lyrically bereft, if you know what I mean. Someone that, a Lennon from my McCartney or however you want to put it. And I've never really done anything with them. I have mountains and mountains of songs, some finished, some unfinished, lyrics, pages and pages, A4 pads filled up to the ceiling. But I've never met the right guy to write with, and that's what I'd love to do when I eventually retire. Do something like that, especially if I'm close to Nashville. Also, I'd like to do voice work because I have a whole bunch of different things to offer in that realm. But as yet, I haven't made any inroads in those two fields.
So now you live in the United States now. Tell us how that came about, and why did you pick where you are?
Well, after Eric sacked me, I couldn't show my face in London. I had to live somewhere.
Okay.
My wife is American. She had lived 10 years, absolutely grew to detest it. It was kind of close, it didn't coincide, but she moved back just before Eric and I parted company. And when to be honest, when you've been with an artist for 30 years, you've given it everything, and you've never done anything wrong, and you've never really broken the rules, maybe played it close to the edge a couple of times, but, and then they get rid of you. It's quite heartbreaking, because you've given so much of yourself, and you're responsible for making those shows perfect and everything sounding great on that album, this album. So I just decided I'll get up and move to America. I always want to have a look at country music, because I like country music, some of it. And I took a year off, while we acclimatized over here, and my wife collected a whole bunch of dogs. And one day I got a call from a guy, I really love his music, Gary Allen. He's a kind of a A-list country guy.
Yeah.
Hasn't had a hit for a while. And they said, we're desperate, we're stuck, can you come and help us? And I said, sure, And the only other thing I'd done in America was I'd gone and helped out the Kentucky Headhunters, who were old friends. And that was quite a whole different thing from the world of Eric, the international touring to playing in honky-tonks and bars and little rodeos. anyway, the Gary thing, I went down and it was in the deep end kind of right away, and you have to look after this guy, look after this guy. I'm like, wow. But I had to adapt to it, and I really love his music, and I've been doing that for 8 years. I was offered a lot of big tours once people knew I was in America, but they were all international, and I'd spent 30 years of leaving my girlfriend, wife, family, whatever you want to call it, behind, where I took off for 6 months or 7 months. So I was away recording for 4 months in Montserrat or something like that at the Caribbean. So they said to me, this is the way it works. We call it Weekend Warrior. There'll be times where we go out maybe for 10 days, but most of the time we just go out on a Thursday. We come back on a Monday, and I thought, well, it fitted great with the dogs, short drive down to Nashville, and that's what I've been doing. Because, one of the things about my job is that it really, really helps if you like the music. I mean, I've done some stuff for people whose music I really didn't like, and it was torturous listening to it on the side of the stage. If you really love the music, then you're more involved in it. You know every cue that's coming, and I kind of feel like that with Gary. And I'm having fun with that. And as I said, just wanting to get writing and see if I can do something with my material and my voice, and maybe write a book is another thing. People always say, oh, you should write a book, man, when I tell them the stories,
Wow. Now, we only got a minute or two left, but a couple of minutes yet. But what I missed in the conversation here was at the very beginning, how did you get into becoming a guitar tech? I mean, what did you do very before then? Were you a musician? Did you have a guitar shop? Did you play an instrument early on? I mean, what got you into it in the first place?
Well, a fascination with music, a love of bands, just being a young guy from Glasgow who was unhappy and just wanted to escape into this rock and roll world of the 70s that we all hear about, the madness, the insanity. My heroes were guys like Keith Moon, Keith Richards, crazy guys, And so I told you I went to London.
And what year was this? What year was this about?
Maybe, I don't know, I can't remember. It's a long time ago, 75, 76 or something. A lot of things happened since then. Other things that we can't talk about in the radio. But anyway, I got a gig, and I was kind of, sorry, that's my dog barking in the back.
That's okay.
I was working on lighting and whatever they would give me to do. That's what led me to tour with all these other bands on behalf of this company. Like I was doing Ramones tours. I with Weather Report, became really good pals with Jaco Pastorius, the legend. Then I'd be off on Manhattan Transfer, then some British bands doing a package tour. And amongst the company's clients were Eric, so you're around the artists, and everyone was having fun in those days, and we got on well. I was in Japan, I asked for the gig, I got it.
Wow. If people want to get in touch with you or follow you, how do they go about doing it? I mean, are you kind of like in a public limelight, or are you kind of like low key, or how's that work for you?
Probably I'm much too low key for my good, but and I'd just like this point to say thank you very much to my manager Will Kelly for allowing me to fit this thing into our very hectic schedule. But if anyone wants to get in touch with me, you could pass on any messages if you get anything positive back. But I generally don't give out my information. I've always been, kind of a
private,
keep it quiet, keep it under wraps, so people. With Eric, when I first joined Facebook, for instance, something like that, I was inundated with all these friend requests, and they were nearly all Clapton maniacs, Clapton fans. Lots and lots who I was friends with, and I'm still friends with. But there's like with every act, doesn't matter if it's Jethro Tull or Simon Garfunkel, Bob Dylan, whoever, Tom Petty. There's a certain amount of obsessive and crazy people that want to know this stuff, got to find out. They're kind of, they just live their life through that medium. And so I tried to avoid things like that, not because, just to not have to deal with it anymore. And as I said, it was very hurtful, the divorce, I call it, from Eric and I. So I really don't, very rarely talk about it unless I'm doing a private event or I'm talking about it as a guitar show or something. And then there's just millions of stories, the George Harrison tours, touring in Japan with Elton John as the keyboard player, Knopfler as the set guitar player, the concert for George, Lenny Kravitz at the White House, doing gigs at Buckingham Palace.
Wow.
The Crossroads show is just mountains of stuff I've got written down here.
Lee, we are out of time, up against the clock, but I'll tell you what. I truly enjoyed this. My fans enjoyed this. Everybody here in the studio enjoyed it. We are going to have you back again. I want to thank you very much. I want to thank my very special guest this evening, Lee Dixon, guitar tech, former guitar tech for Eric Clapton, and many, many, many more famous, legendary musicians. Lee, again, thank you very much. I want to thank your brother-in-law, Wally. It's amazing. Just met him at a car show one day. Here we are. But anyway,
Thank you very much, Robert. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to come back on because that list I've got in front of me, we didn't even touch it really tonight.
We will do that the next time. Lee, take care. Hey,
God bless you and your listeners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hey, I want to thank all my listeners for tuning into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Don't forget, every Tuesday night here on the Town Talk Radio Network, the most legendary names in motorsports and music, and fascinating people as well. Don't forget to check us out here every Tuesday night, 7 to 8 p.m. In the meantime, everybody stay safe, drive carefully, pick up a guitar, and love your family.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
WZHR, Zephyr Hills.
FM 104.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Matt Piper in New York. Supreme